The 9 sacred mounts of northern Italy are groups of chapels and other architectural edifices constructed in the 16th and 17th centuries, dedicated to different aspects of the Christian faith. In addition to the symbolic and spiritual significance, they also possess notable characteristics of beauty and virtue. The chapels rise along a circular course that passes through a forest of oak and chestnut trees and large granite rocks of a pinkish colour. The Sacred Mount of Belmonte is situated above the town of Valperga, at the entrance of the Occo Valley. The monumental complex includes a medieval sanctuary and 13 chapels dedicated to the Passion of Christ. The church was restored in the middle of the 19th century in the Romanesque Lombard style. The Sacred Mount of Crea is situated on one of the highest hills of the Monferrato area in the province of Alessandria. It includes 23 chapels built in 2 different construction phases, one in the 16th and 17th centuries and the other in the 19th century. The oldest part is distinguished by huge groups of sculptures in polychrome terracotta inserted in frescoed environments. These were decorated by artists like Moncalvo, Prestinari and Wespin. The chapels are dedicated to the mysteries of life and to the triumph of the Madonna. In around 500 AD, a church was built on the site of the old oratory, later expanded and improved in 1600. A convent and cloisters adjoining the church date back to the 13th century. The paintings and statues are quite remarkable, and Crea is highly regarded for its artwork, especially in the Chapel of Saint Margherita in the old church complex. The Sacred Calvary Mount of Domodossola is the northernmost of the Sacred Mounts. The 14 chapels of the Sacred Mount Calvary of Domodossola were built to an architectural and urban project dating back to 1656. In 1657, the Sanctuary of the Crucifix was built. The long period between the start and the completion of the complex, almost 2 centuries, endows the chapels with architectural characteristics that range from the Baroque to the Neoclassical. Inside the sanctuary there are 2 chapels. Jesus dies on the cross, Gesù muore sulla croce, and the Deposition, la Deposizione. The Sacred Mount of the Holy Trinity of Giffa sits on the Piemonte shore of Lago Maggiore, in the province of Urbano Cusio Ossola. The Sacred Mount has 3 principal chapels dedicated to biblical subjects and 2 other smaller minor chapels joined to the sanctuary and the portico of the Via Crucis. In 1752 the portico was added with frescoes of the stations of the Via Crucis. The 14 bays with crossed vaults and stone columns highlight the devotional function of the course along the 14 stations. The Sacred Mount of Europa can be found in a splendid alpine scene at 1,200 meters above sea level, a short distance from the city of Biella. The complex containing the sanctuary and the Sacred Mount is considered to be the most important place for worship of Maria in the Alpine area. The sanctuary is pervaded by a deep sense of religious faith which is strongly alive. 800,000 pilgrims and more than 100 pilgrimages come here each year. The environmental conditions of the location in which Europa's Sacred Mount was built and particularly the high mountains, didn't allow founders to make any changes to land and vegetation. The natural barrier made by conifers growing between the sacred mound and the nearby sanctuary is the only environmental intervention they could plan and create here. The overall complex is divided into 3 large squares, and it is based on 2 big places of cult, the ancient Basilica and the new church. The statue of the Black Virgin is the symbol of the sanctuary. It is to her that the pilgrims, flocking to Europa every day, address their prayers. Simple and majestic, the old basilica is decorated with beautiful 14th century frescoes and sculptures. The cemetery in Europa is interesting from many points of view. Its location in a charming alpine landscape and its general structure and the architecture. The pilgrim's path towards the sacred mount reaches its most symbolic meaning at the summit of the mountain, where the architectural complex rises. From here, the path branches out, creating devotional routes which go from one building to the other. Placed on the summit of a hill overlooking the Orta Lake, this sacred mount fits in perfectly with the surrounding landscape. The construction of the chapels follow each other in a spiral itinerary which went on for over a century, representing a display of different architectural styles. The inside decoration, rich with statues and frescoes that portray the life of St. Francis, is distinguished by the realism of the figures. The Sacred Mount of Orta is dedicated to St. Francis of Assisi, and each of the 20 chapels recalls an episode of the life of the saint, interpreted as similar to the life of Jesus. The woods, the variety of architectural and decorative styles, the enchanting panorama of the lake are elements that make this place unique, pervaded by a sense of meditation and serenity. The sacred mount of Varese that sits above Varese rises to 883 meters. The devotional path extends along the slopes of Monte Velate in a splendid panoramic position that looks down on a beautiful setting of pre-alpine lakes and the plain. The Via Sacra, Sacred Way, started being laid in 1604 on the initiative of the Cappuccino friar Giovanni Battista Gugliari, who planned the construction of 14 chapels dedicated to the mysteries of the Rosary. The Santuario di Santa Maria del Monte was completed in 1680 and has been the object of pilgrimage and a cloister for enclosed nuns. Because of hardships, for example, for believers who could not afford to undertake an expensive and risky journey, and to keep alive the sense of the pilgrimage, the Church introduced in the West the so-called pratiche sostitutive, substitute practices, pilgrimages to easier to reach places and sanctuaries which in some ways evoke the scenarios of the Gospels. The Sacred Mount of Varallo is located in Valsesia in the province of Vercelli. It sits on a buttress of rock above the town of Varallo, and it is the oldest and the most important sacred mount of the Alpine region. At the top of the hill above the town of Varallo stands Sacri Monti. It was completed between the end of the 15th and 18th centuries by the major artists of the Piedmont and Lombardy of the period. In 1614, the building of the new Basilica was begun thanks to a donation by Agostino Beccaria and the alms of the pilgrims. In the Baroque interior, the nave was decorated by Francesco Leva and Carlo Penna of Comasco. The 6 side chapels were completed and furnished during the 1700s and early 1800s and reveal the artistic tendencies of those times, ranging from Rococo to Neoclassical. Situated on the western shore of the Como Lake, the sacred mount of Osuccio is incredibly scenic. The sacred mount consists of 15 chapels dedicated to the mysteries of the Rosary, built between 1635 and 1710. The paternity of the stucco sculptures was Agostina Silva. The frescoes were painted by Carlo Gaffuri, Innocenzo Toriani and Gianpaolo Recchi. The great value of this church is due to the fact that inside it has wide frescoed areas. They are the remains of a series of stories that originally had to cover the walls of the whole church and the apse. Hundreds of chapels housing statues and rising on the hills of Piemonte and Lombardy are still today, after 5 centuries, the goals of the faithful and the object of artistic appreciation.